if you think about it, we did a virtual council meeting back in May, and we were still in a very early time of what we are now dealing with. And there were a lot of unknowns at that point. There's still a lot of unknowns, but there were a lot more back then. And in one way, that seems like an awful long time ago. In reality, it's not. It's just a bit of time. And we've learned to build relationships through technology, but they're not quite the same, frankly. I do draw energy from interacting with all of you on coffee breaks or social activities at council meetings, and even visits to states and other activities or firm meetings. And I think that we all wished for that time back, and we will get back to that. But in the meantime, it's really about our profession and how we can be resilient in this environment. We have 133 years of history of going through all sorts of different challenges in our history. And throughout that, our profession has been steadfast in its focus on its mission, its purpose, and its own skill set to help whatever those issues are, to help the world, the economy, maybe regulators, businesses through those environments. And so that is what we're doing today. Next slide, please. And so you might say, why is that really? And I've put on here the last 7, or including this one, 6 plus this one, themes of our last council meetings. And I believe that what the profession is doing today, and it's being extraordinarily successful, extraordinarily, whether you work in firms or businesses or not-for-profits or government or academia. CPAs throughout this country, in fact, throughout this world, our members are leading the adaptation of what has to happen in society and in business today in all sorts of different ways. And the reason for that is look at those titles: adapt, perspective, connect, expand, ready for the next, extraordinary times, going beyond. Our profession sometimes gets labeled as maybe not so quick to change or not so quick to adapt. And oftentimes I get questions in different settings, and people make a premise in those questions and make that point. And I almost always challenge that premise. I actually believe that our profession is incredibly talented at adapting to change and seeing opportunity and finding solutions. And that's really what's driving us today as a profession to be as successful as we are. The men and women in our profession are delivering on all of those words. And it's because we were prepared for that in a lot of ways. No, none of us would have ever imagined the type of change that we're having to deal with. But the notion of a profession ready for change, enacting change, building new opportunities well before today's current environment has propelled us to a unique position in the business world today. And that we all have to be grateful to each other on that, because no one did that alone. No one organization did that alone. No one firm did that alone. We have been doing that collectively as a profession. And I am sure that that will continue as we move forward. Next slide. What I'd like to do is spend a bit of time today in sort of 3 buckets of thinking: what we've done, what we're doing, and what's likely to be approached in the future. And one of the things that we have been doing is deepening the core. We've been focusing on things that expand the core, like broader assurance services and SOC reporting, and even new dynamic audit solutions, as we will be talking about, and Sue will update you on here in a little bit. We provided unbelievable amounts of guidance in accounting and auditing areas. New standards have been adopted while we're in the midst of a COVID environment. We have helped people understand the implications of thinking differently about tax and planning. And we have certainly led the way in the ability to adopt technology. We've seen unbelievable rises in the firms that are using cash solutions with their clients and the response from their clients in that way. And truly, our profession has really been focusing on what its core is and branching that out, leveraging that, if you will, into a new environment, and one that we're doing quite well in. Next slide. One of the key components of that is our ability as a profession to think in a systems way, in an ecosystem way. I think forever our profession has understood the notion that we function, and oftentimes in the center part of an ecosystem that is evolving around us. And in some cases, as things have evolved in this environment, some firms have realized maybe we need to, tighten up some of our own ecosystem and our own community or communities that they're operating in. And maybe there were some weaknesses that they're focused on in that environment. We've done the same. We've leveraged incredible relationships we've had in Washington and other business activities, relationships with technology suppliers and firms and leading thinkers in that area, obviously with standard setters and regulators and other types of government agencies. But we also have branched out into new relationships and built new coalitions. And we've tried to bring those collective sets of thinking together for the betterment of the profession and the firms and the businesses that we serve in that environment. The shifts here are pretty dramatic. There was a recent survey of CFOs, and 74% believe that a reasonable amount of the people in their finance functions will be shifted permanently to work from home environments. Really significant element in that environment. The new service development and opportunities, including things that we've done during this COVID environment, like supply chain leadership, which is one that where our profession is called on to work on. New skill set development inside firms. I know of firms that have taken, for instance, let's say in the bankruptcy area, and trained their entire staff to be proficient in bankruptcy law so that they can be conversant like they would maybe in tax or accounting areas with their clients. Not necessarily a positive look on the economy, but one they thought that their firm had to be ready for. And so all throughout our profession, in all different size firms and all different size and complexity of business environments, our members are adapting and leading through not only what they have dominion over, but building this ecosystem, enhancing their own ecosystem in that environment. And so when I think about it, next slide, please, I'll remind you on a message that we delivered in the very first virtual meeting, the regional meetings. And we said that from our perspective, the key to this environment was focused predominantly on small business. And our role, our purpose as a profession was pretty dramatic. First, we have, and we continue to have, a very critical role to be the profession that helps restore consumer confidence. Maybe not the only ones, but a very critical role in the economy to help our clients, our friends, our neighbors, our employers, to really understand the opportunity, to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to not just be bleak. We have the opportunity to bring together different perspectives and our knowledge and our years of experience in many cases to help restore that confidence. In the end, economies thrive on consumer confidence. And our ability to be a key player in that is happening today and will happen as we move forward and we continue to fight whatever new battles there might be in this environment and seize any new opportunities along that way. And likewise, unlike most of the other major economic challenges in our lifetimes, this is a small business environment challenge. It's Main Street businesses, or our friends in the UK would say high street businesses. It's throughout the world. Yes, there are larger businesses in stress, no doubt about it. Large industry segments in stress, no doubt about it. But ultimately, most of the developed economies of the world, and certainly this one, is based on the employment and the spend capabilities of employment that comes from small business. And small business, and our message has been very clear on Capitol Hill in this environment, small business is the disproportionate fuel that runs that confidence and that employment and that spending capability. And when we talk about tomorrow, for instance, when Mark talks about some of the advocacy notions, you will see how heavily focused we have been in that small business environment. And I'll speak a little bit to that as well. That will continue to be the challenges as we move forward. And finally, our trusted advisor role. Our trusted advisor role cannot be overstated today. We've talked about trusted advisor literally for decades. We've talked about the skill sets and the services that are necessary for us to be true trusted advisors and how to balance that with the public interest and our responsibility in the public interest. But the ability to see things and present things and to be honest brokers, not just pessimist honest brokers, but true honest brokers in both directions. That trusted advisor role today has never, never, ever been as much in demand. I talk about often that we live in a world of lack of trust, and yet we are the most trusted profession. I hope that each and every one of you in this council meeting, and when you interact with other members in your state or in your firm or in your company, helps to deliver that notion of how important it is to the types of challenges that we are facing, and frankly, to the types of opportunities that businesses and firms and CPAs have in this environment. Our profession is doing extraordinarily well. We need to be humble about that because we are a lot luckier than a lot of other businesses and services and even professions. And as a whole, we are doing extraordinarily well. It doesn't mean some in our profession aren't hurting, they are. But the fact is that our ability to be humble in that and our ability to leverage that trust into positive attitudes much beyond our own inner circles will be a key component of how economies and services evolve. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing and what is that all about? You all, many of you, probably all of you know about our town halls and our members' support in that environment. We've had more than 100,000 members participate in our town halls, not 100,000 unique, about 25,000 or so unique participants in that environment, representing untold number of firms and carrying on the messages from that environment. About 78% are repeat. They've been to more than one, which obviously shows that they're getting the types of information that they have. And we've been averaging month to month, 15% growth in the participants in these environments. We bring outside speakers. We bring content that's really pertinent. We answer questions in those environments. And it's become, in many instances, a must attend for a lot of our members. We've produced agile financial series that are out there for our members in business and industry. We've done podcasts in deeper dive environments in which on a global basis, we've had almost 500,000 downloads of podcasts. People need information and they're turning to us and our state society partners in that information. If we added all the state society numbers to these, there would be huge amounts of activities. And so our interaction has never been greater with our members in that environment. And that also leads us to our advocacy. And we'll have a deeper dive on advocacy later in this meeting. But I wanted to just give you a few points. As you know, we did a lot of work on tax extensions and we did a lot of work on the original go around of PPP. And we've been a very strong voice on a lot of points in the PPP2 debate that's going on. Literally a PPP2 debate that's going on as we speak in the halls of Capitol. And there's a lot of political division, and maybe they'll get to a deal. Although this morning we would have said unlikely that they would get to a deal on a different set of funding and set of parameters related to a different PPP or PPP2 as we're calling it. When we went live, that tone had sort of changed, and maybe there is a greater possibility of maybe something in the ballpark of a $2 trillion package, of which PPP and other government assistance programs will be a real key component of that. We've been a voice to saying that we need easy forgiveness. We've been a voice to say that we need another round of funding focused on small businesses, particularly on those small businesses that have been in industries that have been extraordinarily hurt. We have been a strong voice about the need for tax deductibility and a resolution of that issue. What's being talked about as we speak would include that particular proposal. And if it doesn't pass, it likely will pass, maybe even not till January. But from a forgiveness perspective, there's a good chance, if we think about it as tax practitioners, is almost like how we've fought almost every year with what we call tax extenders that expire and then they get reinstated retroactively. We think there's still a pretty good chance that actually will happen. We've been a voice for 501c3s and C6s, in the environment to be covered, a big part of our economy, not for organizations like us, but predominantly smaller C6 organizations that are very vital to professions and businesses and communities. And that's a very important element as well. And as we focused on this issue, we're prepared in a new PPP2 to give members opportunities for their clients to access whatever might be enacted through CPA.com. And one of those global networks or those ecosystem environments, we have ready to go a fintech solution that for some firms will be a plan B if their clients can't access traditional access to banks. In some cases, it will actually be a plan A because it will address certain things like the agent issues and others as we bring basically a tech-based pipeline right into the system. And depending on how much the funding will be, that may be, again, a system in which the dollars will move very, very quickly. And so we're prepared for that if, in fact, Congress does enact. And obviously, as I said, some in our profession are hurting. And so we've focused on how we support, CPA exams, CGMA exams. We've had the opportunity to work with the test centers, for instance, on CPA exam and Prometric. What we see there is that's coming back fairly strong, but not to the extent of making up for basically the 3 or 4 months that was lost when virtually all of those test centers were closed. So the numbers are returning to something approaching a normalcy of volume with the extended hours that the test centers have today and the capacity that exists. But it doesn't appear that we're going to have a catch-up component in that environment, or at least that we're not seeing that at this point. And included in that is some of the work that we've been piloting on CGMA in the US, now being brought globally through our work with CIMA, because the need for those solutions to be technology-based is paramount. And our support of, if there's a hardship situation on students, on the testing side, and of course, even for our members on the benevolent fund side. Next slide. I talked about the ecosystem, and one of the things that we did was we led the formation of a small business funding coalition. And that environment is, that environment is alive and well. About 3.7 million businesses are represented by this coalition, which is much larger than one slide would hold. And together, 78 million employees are represented by the groups that have been working together with us, coming together frequently for meetings and updates, sharing information, figuring out the best solutions to problems that are out there, and then deploying it back into the business ecosystem in that environment. And as I also mentioned a couple of times, our work on the advocacy front, dissemination of information with state societies has been paramount as well. And I know, because I've participated in many, many state society town hall meetings, the work and the commitment of communicating state-based information and also being a conduit to communicating national information has been extraordinarily valuable. And with that in mind, next slide, I want to recognize, again, and it seems like every one of our meetings, the retirement of 2 fantastic leaders in state societies that are retiring. And if you've been around on council for a while, you know we have had an extraordinarily high number of leaders from state societies, CEOs that have recently retired. It is a huge impact on our profession. The work that state societies do is so critically important. Basically, our members, a high percentage of our members are joint members in that environment. First is Cindy Hubiak, and Cindy is in Arizona for 20 years. Cindy is a dear friend. She has a quiet leadership style. You can see that smile in that picture. I don't think I've ever seen Cindy without that smile. She has the ability to deliver, and has delivered to me and to the Institute, incredible feedback, incredible intelligence. She actually is a former member of council, serving on council prior to being named CEO in Arizona, and is now moving to a different phase in her life. Cindy, I want to thank you for your tremendous leadership, your counsel, your friendship. And I know, as I speak on behalf of all the CPAs in this country, thank you for your leadership, not only in Arizona, but on a national basis. And Brad has been around an awful long time. Brad has been in Tennessee as the CEO for 44 years. 44 years. Brad was one of the first people I met when I first became CEO in Louisiana back it was actually a meeting in early 1988. shortly after I started in '87, and Brad was already a veteran of the thinking of our profession. Brad also is a true advisor to me, has been a great friend. The ability to position the members in Tennessee for success. Again, quiet leadership. Even when he's on a golf course, he has to put up with me, maybe not a quiet member of a foursome with him. But just a person that has been involved in the firm issues, PCPS, CPA-SCA leadership, and has built an incredible team of people in Tennessee and an incredible approach to the services that members need. Brad, as I see you leaving after 44 years, and I combine that with some of the other recent retirees, just the incredible amount of knowledge and history and compassion and leadership for our profession, that you moving on to the next phase of your life is virtually impossible for this profession, maybe to ever create again. And it has been, both of you have been really key leaders in building our profession. And so thank you very, very much. And when I look at that, actually, I want to make council members fully aware that there are people in number 2 and number 3 positions that also have been around a long time that retire. And so we focus here on the CEOs. But, for instance, Beth Lyons in Massachusetts, 44 years is the deputy in Massachusetts retiring. And there have been many others throughout the years, and there'll be more to come. And it is something that I think we have to be committed to managing as a profession as well. The incredible knowledge, just like, and I'll speak a little bit about succession inside firms in a minute, but succession inside the leadership circles of our institutions is also very, very critical. Next slide. So where are we, and what are some of the things of today, and maybe some emphasis points, if I could spend a little bit of time on this. First off, we adapted very quickly to auditing remotely, and that was sort of the audits in process around the beginning of COVID. We're now approaching a December year end in which a significant amount of audits will take place, many of which predominantly remotely. There's been a significant amount of information that has been produced from our teams to help people understand how to manage risk, how to look at the issues out there. And as you know, we've had a major emphasis on quality. And I would encourage all of you as leaders in state societies, as leaders in firms, to be committed to quality as we move to this December year-end audit season, if you will. I think we have to remind all of our audit partners and all of our audit teams that COVID-19 does not give us, the ability or the excuse maybe to say it's too hard to look at things in as a thorough way, or to look the other way on something, or maybe that's good enough. We're not a profession of good enough as it relates to our public interest responsibilities. We're going to have people who are facing audits in a totally unique environment. We're going to have entities that are going to be subject to yellow government requirements as far as funding in a totally different way, and maybe even not even realizing that they are there. We're going to have different compliance. We're going to have different risks that are existing in different businesses. So as we look at opportunities in other areas, we also have to remember our quality commitment on the audit side, and I would include comp and review in that space as well. And obviously, it takes diligence and probably more effort to pull that off effectively. We've produced more than 40 different articles to help people understand those things. We've taken some of the materials from our Center for Plain English Accounting and made that widely available in those environments. And we will continue to do those types of things to make sure that the quality is really focused on in that area. When we think about technology and expectations and talent, I do want to, I want to focus on talent first. In this environment, we have virtually all of the firms that are focused and dealing with really serious talent management issues. And I'm not talking about turnover, but I'm talking about a new set of talent issues that have not really been on the agenda of firms for a long time. How do we balance this work from home environment and these environments in which particularly younger staff are dealing with totally different, teaching their children at home, different kind of financial challenges at home and the like. Those are different types of challenges in work-life balance. Yes, it's been on leaders' minds, but they're much more paramount today. And unfortunately, we're going to face a real compression of work. We have had extended due dates on tax. We've had even some, because of natural disasters and the like, extended beyond October 15th. We've had huge amounts of different types of government support programs, PPP being the biggest one, but not the only one in that environment. We've had sort of the uncertainty that our clients are facing, and therefore putting additional pressures on our clients, on our staff that I just mentioned. And then quickly, we're going to be rolling around to a new tax season that comes about essentially on the doorsteps of all of these other activities, and potentially a new government support set of tools that are out there, and maybe new businesses facing new stresses that are out there. Our talent, whether they are CPA members or they're soon to be CPA members, our staff, our partners, there are huge talent management issues that our profession has never faced before. They're hard, and we must be focused on those activities. I know I focus on them a significant amount, even with our own team in that environment. And I raise it at this level because people believe there might be some, silver bullet type of answer out there. Oh, it's going to be great when the calendar turns to 2021. That's not so much true in this particular environment. There is not going to be that automatic shift, and the environment's going to be different. As I speak with firm CEOs, I know this is really, really high on their agendas. Now, again, I'll go back to our profession is very successful. A lot of people are a lot worse than we are. And so we have to be humble about these problems, just as I said, we have to be humble about our successes. But they are issues that need to be addressed nonetheless. As we focus on some of these other issues, I would remind people, for instance, in the tax and financial planning area, clearly the information we're seeing in the in our members who work in the planning area, the amount of rework, the challenges and the desire of their clients to rethink things very dramatically and very quickly has never been as intense as it has been. The tax planning aspects with uncertainty, like PPP deductibility, have never been maybe more complex as they are today. We bring that into the valuation issues and the fraud risk issues. For instance, we've just updated and put out through the FVS area a business fraud framework, a financial fraud framework that people can use. We know there is potential for fraud out there. Big fraud, small fraud. Fraud becomes uncovered in economic downturns. Fraud becomes more prevalent where there are opportunities and different programs. And we have an obligation to be very, very diligent in this process. Those of you who lead firms, you will probably have staff people that will incur opportunities to see fraud like they've never had before. And how we handle these as a profession. Those of you who are in CFO roles, the control environments, maybe the expedient requests that we have, all create fraud risk in that environment. And so our profession has to be diligent in that space. As I mentioned, the bankruptcy area is going to be big. And I think I would remind everybody in all of these emerging areas that we have an ethical obligation to be competent in what we take on, not just a passing knowledge, but actually competence in these areas. Doesn't mean that we can't get up to speed in taking on an engagement. We can. That meets our ethical requirements. But it's something we need to think about in our clients' acceptance and our assignment of personnel. And finally, the business model issues that incorporate technology changes. We know the rapid changes of technology that are happening. We know the pressures on business models and supply chains. In fact, new opportunities in that space are just constantly with us. Even this morning, we were engaged with a government agency, a federal government agency, frankly, that we would never have been engaged with before, that was reaching out to us, that they have certain risk points that they see from their own span of regulatory control. They believe monitoring, that the CPA profession of monitoring those things is actually the best profession to provide them comfort in their own regulatory requirements and oversight responsibilities. And it ties into supply chain. It actually ties right into the issues that we've been talking about supply chain management. And so we obviously will help them make the contacts that they need to make inside the CPA profession to take advantage of our reputation, our trusted role, and our skill set in these areas. And a whole host of new services broadly defined in the SOC space, but certainly in many of them in the technology space, including cybersecurity that clients will rely on in those environments. And the assurance space is ever growing with SOC reporting. We have firms that specialize exclusively in that area, and we have firms that are now in the SOC space that previously never were. That is a tremendous growth opportunity. And I would just like to remind you all, again, as we go back into being prepared for this, and this was the combination work of state societies, the AICPA, NASBA, and the state boards. Starting about 8 or 9 years ago, we went through a process of amending the state statutes to make sure that these broader assurance services would be required to be performed by licensed CPA firms when they're referencing the profession's standards. That was a huge element of changing the traditional definition of what was a reserve service. We were successful. We've been successful, I think, in all but one state in being able to achieve that revised statute. That, again, positions the profession to be very successful in these types of environments. Next slide. As it relates to firms and what's happening in this space. So we've talked a lot about the expanded services in that area. You might be interested in a couple of other areas. Mergers and acquisitions. We continue to believe that mergers and acquisitions will be a growing area. It probably has had a bit of a slowdown in 2020. But as firms look at their future and what their opportunities are, I think that there are a significant number of in-discussion activities in this space. And I think we will see also some pretty significant changes as firms look how to go to market and different partnering arrangements and different types of non-traditional acquisitions as they fill out their diversified structures. And so I think we're on the cusp of very significant change in organizational structure and organizational go-to-market strategies inside firms. I also think it's a time to remind ourselves, and this is one I think state societies can be very influential with small firms, and obviously we're doing the work with small firms as well, and that is on the issue of succession. We just completed some research with the Succession Institute, Bill Reeb's team that has been doing a lot of work in survey work for us and writing in this area and guidance in this area for a long, long time. Basically, what the research says is that COVID-19, for the most part, has not changed partners' ideas of when they will retire. 70 to 80%, depending on the size of firms, would be the indicator of where that would be. So people not necessarily right now changing their ideas. That's probably a reflection of the profession doing pretty well. Mergers in smaller firms, I think we would say probably not real significant change. I think probably a little bit larger firms than the smaller sole proprietors and single owner firms, probably an uptick in their interest in that particular area. On practice continuation areas, this is a really, really significant statistic. Only about 6% of sole owner firms have practice continuation agreements based on our recent survey work, 6%. We have tens of thousands of small single owner firms. That is a very significantly small number. I think state societies, I think AICPA, I think leaders in state societies, we need to be a voice to help smaller firms focus on that issue. We live in a world in which we see a lot of deaths, unfortunately, a lot of things happening in people's lives that were not planned. And practice continuation agreements are critical, not only from the public interest to protect client activities and confidentiality, but for families and spouses to be able to realize some benefit from a practice that has been built. Interestingly, and again, state societies, please take note on this issue, there's a high percentage, 47% of those firms that indicated that do not have a plan, that they do not know where to start. They do not know where to start. And yet through PCPS, as an example, we have unbelievable amounts of data and examples and forms and thinking processes that a firm can use. We have to increase the awareness of this particular area. And then, even for those that have it, only 7% of the 6% that actually have practice continuation agreements actually have a timeline in which their practice continuation agreement has to be executed in. And if you think about a small firm, time is of the essence when there's an emergency because clients need immediate attention. And the lack of having immediate attention may mean that the client moves off somewhere else and there is no practice continuation. And so I call these to your attention really to put this on the radar screen of all of our leaders and all of our state societies that are out there. And the other thing I would say is that in larger firms, about 43% have succession plans. That's up. It's not high enough, but it's up. But interestingly, about 60% that do not have plans indicate that they are close, and 53% saying they have significant succession challenges right now, which of course creates an environment in that. On the corporate finance area, I'd like to call on Andrew Harding, our CEO of Management Accounting, to give you a few thoughts on some of the work and what we're hearing from that space, not only in the US, but around the globe.
Thank you, Barry. Good afternoon, everybody. Back in 2017, 80% of CFOs were saying that their finance teams didn't have the skills they need for finance transformation. By 2019, 90% of CFOs were saying the same thing. Beginning of 2020, pre the pandemic, 95% of CFOs were saying that their finance teams did not have the skills that they needed for finance transformation. That was pre-pandemic. While we've been going through the pandemic, we've been hearing stories from CFOs, and they've been describing how they've gone through 4 phases: panic, stabilize, reset, and plan to thrive. And they've been going through those at different paces. Those who digitized early found themselves getting through steps 1, 2, and into step 3 very, very quickly. Those without digitization were finding themselves struggling to even do the basic monthly reporting and monthly closures. So we see a digital divide occurring. Those who digitized are nimble, those who haven't have become slower than ever. What that's meant is what we've described as the future of finance has accelerated. If 95% of CFOs in January were saying their teams didn't have the skills they need, you can bet that that number's increased by now. The need to reskill has become an imperative. For us, when we look at CGMA, the need to keep that qualification up to speed, up to date, evergreen has become more critical than ever. We need to be producing new content at the same time as preserving the integrity of the test. These are big tasks. When we look at the skills that are needed, the skills that CFOs need, what they've been drawing on, they talk about automation, which is what we knew about. We were expecting that in the future of finance. They talk about forecasting, but not just doing a quarterly reforecast or a mid-year reforecast. Some of them have been forecasting and reforecasting every week. They talk about scenario planning. You know, over time, there are some businesses who have a reputation for great scenario planning. Do a search for scenario planning on Google and you'll find Shell's mountain and oceans scenarios coming up there. Now everybody's doing scenario planning and they're doing multiple scenario plans. Data analytics, again, absolutely critical going forward. Some of that is stuff that we would have learned when we were 16 years old doing math class, but that's now automated. It uses massive data sets, it's powerful, and it's vital information for business. The final part echoes something which Barry talked about earlier, the understanding of business models, the ability to analyze your business model, to identify your stakeholders, see where value is created, look at your supply chain, rework that, and reimagine that. These are really exciting things to be able to do. Very, very different from traditional finance skills, very different from the things which accountants in business were talking about even a decade ago. Fast moving times, very exciting times, but accelerating on us. We thought it was fast before, but it's faster than ever now. Barry, back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. And in tied to that, really in tying into the next topic on this slide, which is the people, one of the things that we issued was a thought piece back in February, pre-COVID-19, that was about finance transformation, the human perspective. It would really focused on the issues of how do you manage in that environment. I think it's a must read, whether you're in the financial management accounting space, or you're in the advisory space in firms as you work with clients. And what we recently did is we just updated that about the human perspective related to COVID-19. I talked about that some bit earlier about the managing of this work-life balance issue. And obviously in the human capital space, the diversity, equity, and inclusion is front and center. And Tracy's outstanding comments at the beginning, she referenced the panel that we have later today. But I want to call your attention to something else. On October 28th, Kimberly and Rich, the outgoing and incoming chairman of our diversity commission, and myself, along with the leads of the affinity partners, are going to be doing a program. It's actually a 3-hour program live, talking about the issues of today, mostly as it relates to inside the profession, some of the challenges inside the profession, some of the things that people are doing, some of the things that people feel, and to try to talk through those in what we would call a courageous conversation, or a courageous set of conversations about the issues that are out there today. If we're really going to address some of these issues in rational and reasonable and productive ways, we need to be able to have those types of conversations. One of the things that the National Commission does extraordinarily well is it has these really difficult conversations. In fact, it has a rule that says we suspend our right to be offended at the beginning of every one of those meetings. We're going to take that attitude and have a discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion in that space. We're going to talk about some things like promotion and advancement and job assignment, and some of the things that are going on in the world, but again, relating it back into the profession. It will build off of the panel that you'll hear later today. And related to that, we look forward to sharing that time, as I mentioned, with our affinity partners. One of the things that we have is something is called the Accounting Inclusion Maturity Model. It is a tool to help firms wrestle with this issue. And Crystal Cook, our director in this area, has been doing an awful lot of work talking with firms, certainly firms of maybe in the top 500 from a size perspective, that are trying to put programs in place. And they can use this maturity model as a guideline, best practice, understanding what's the feeling inside their own firms and what they can do. And she's advising on that particular issue. Next slide, please. So moving into the continued innovation space, what I'd first like to do is, you know that the Dynamic Audit Solution Project is a major one. We are a little bit over half, or maybe about 60% of the way through the first phase. And I'd like to invite Sue Coffey into the panel discussion, or into this presentation, to give you an update on where that very significant project is. Sue is co-lead in this project with Eric Oscarson. Sue?
Yeah, thank you, Barry, and hello, everybody. As you know, a couple of years ago, based on a variety of trends that we were seeing around technology disruption, perceived value of the audit, larger firm investment and smaller firm needs in the audit tool space, hiring patterns, we put the issue of the audit of the future on our agenda. Very broadly, we've been discussing the initiative in the context of 4 key drivers. Skills, which Barry talked about, standards, which I'm so proud of the work of the Auditing Standards Board in adopting and modernizing some standards and the continued work they're doing, and technology and methodology. And technology and methodology is what DAS, or the Dynamic Audit Solution, is all about. And DAS is essentially, as Barry said, a partnership among AICPA developing methodology, Caseware International, who is our technology partner developing the platform, CPA.com is the distributor to develop and deliver the product, and it's a merging of the technology and methodology drivers. Barry mentioned Eric as the co-executive sponsor with me. Amy Paulicki, who many of you know, who is our VP of Audit and Innovation, is the leader of an incredibly talented development team. And what DAS is about, and we've talked about this before, is transforming the audit. It's about doing the audit completely differently, merging methodology, knowledge, and data with emerging technologies like AI and machine learning. And essentially what we're doing is we're developing an activity-based methodology that uses data from many different sources. It uses embedded auditor knowledge, and it uses those advanced technologies to inform auditor judgment through the selection of relevant procedures at the appropriate time. It is not about automating existing methodology. It's about using data and knowledge to their fullest extent to drive risk assessment and suggestions, as well as recommend audit procedures, essentially guiding the auditor on what to do, when to do it, and what to document. And it's a guide. It doesn't do it for the auditor, it's just a guide. So we are just shy of 2 years into the development of the solution. And actually this coming Monday, we'll be hitting a major milestone. We'll be launching what we're calling a minimally viable product to a group of firms. And this minimally viable product will be used by about 400 practitioners, most using actual client data, which will then inform us on the release of the first version of an end-to-end solution in the summer of 2021. The solution is being developed by a team of AICPA employees, as well as contracted talent from several major firms. And we've been working with a much larger group of professionals from a number of major firms to essentially test the output of our development sprints to make sure that A, what we're doing is actually transformative, which is our goal, and B, will meet the expectations of firms of all sizes. So this is, as we've talked about in the past, a big, very complicated project that I'm happy to say is going well, not without challenges as you would expect, but actually going well, and we're hitting our milestones. And launching MVP on Monday is really an incredibly exciting milestone. We still have a ways to go to get to next summer, but what's been done so far is really amazing and candidly pretty cool. New and very different ways to assess risk, bringing in all types of information into the mix and serving up recommendations to the auditor. So the team is doing fantastic work. Stay tuned. We'll be updating you as we get closer and closer to our end-to-end launch, but really good stuff going on. Thanks, and Barry, back to you.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks for your leadership on in this area, you and Eric. It's just been phenomenal. I would say this is a huge change management issue. For those of you who've been on council for a while, when we made a very concerted effort to address quality and make some changes in peer review, what I said to you at that point is, you're going to hear noise in the system about some members not liking that, and that was true. Well, Dynamic Audit Solution is not about, peer review or whatever. It is, in fact, though, going to be a huge change management issue that will be upon us to rethink what it is to do an audit or how to do an audit is going to be a major change management. And there are going to be parts of our profession who say, I'm very comfortable with the way it has been. But this is the adaptation or innovation of technology and rethinking a core service. I'm incredibly proud of the team and the members and the firms that have stepped up to really be focused on the future for the benefit of the entire profession. big milestone coming forward. Likewise, .cpa, you've probably seen a video that Eric and I did and sent out to all the members and also to firms about the .cpa domain. The top level domain is the new sort of frontier, the new place that the internet is really moving. The future is not in the .coms and the .edus and the .orgs of the world. It is in top level domains. You can look at it and see where that is. It's much more of a controlled environment. You can see where that's happening in .aws, .apples, etc. This is a digital identity space for the CPA profession. It is being rolled out in a very professional way. And in fact, people in the internet domain space are looking exactly how we're doing this, and in fact being very complimentary about how we are positioning this to protect the profession but also create opportunity. The end of October is the end of a first phase. It's a very important phase. Any firm, it's firm first here, any firm that has a .com URL and assuming they're a licensed firm, will have the opportunity, has the opportunity to get .cpa, the equivalent .cpa. After the expiration of the October 31 time, we will not be able to claw that back in. And ultimately, over the next many months to basically a year, different phases will happen in the .cpa rollout, including ultimately a global rollout, which we are required to do if we are to own a top-level domain. So it's a very strategic, long-term, as I've said to firms, you're making a decision here that has the potential of being with you and that firm for decades. And it is not one that you should be just thinking is not very important. It is very important. Other areas of innovation that you should just be aware of. Annually, we host emerging technology, sort of deep dive type of activities. Most recently, that's been in the blockchain area. More than 100 key participants in that symposium, and then we publish the results. Everything from audit issues to accounting issues to technology issues to emerging uses of blockchain to new types of assurance services in that space. That was recently held, as I said, with more than 100 participants, highest interest ever from real significant leaders in this particular space. Each year, we also host a C-suite level executive roundtable for technology-based companies that are focused on the accounting profession. We've been doing this for many years. We also now host these in other places other than in the US, because obviously technology flows from other places in the world as well. That executive roundtable generally happens every January. This one is being pushed off a couple of months, but it brings together those CEO and COO minds that are focused on technology solutions for the profession, maybe disruption for the profession. We are the convener of this, and it is an incredibly powerful notion of us to be able to plug into what is happening and to deliver new leading edge thinking for the profession, broadly defined. And likewise, our Startup Accelerator project is that as well, but at a different level. Literally, we interact with those businesses that are proverbially starting in someone's garage, where someone believes they have a disruptive approach or disruptive technology that could be extraordinarily beneficial to the profession or maybe extraordinarily disruptive to the profession. We want to know about those things the best we can. And typically we invite 25 or so companies to present, and we get an insight into that. And then we seek ways to partner with a handful of those each year that we think have the most direct impact into the profession. We're in the third year or the third cohort of this particular environment. It's one of the ways that we keep the innovation sort of pedal to the metal for the profession, and that is something that we continue to do even in this COVID world. Next slide. You know, as we move to the end, I'll remind you again about submitting questions, and we're going to have about 30 minutes or so for questions. And hopefully on questions on things that I've covered or things that you might want to ask in a general way. I want to invite Sue back to give you an update on the CPA evolution perspective. Obviously, the pipeline is very important. We know universities are in a very significant disruption phase. I just read over the weekend a prediction that enrollments overall, not necessarily accounting enrollments, would be down about 17% collectively in American universities. That was a prediction. If it's anywhere close to that, we're going to have our fair share of that disruption as well. And there's an increasing percentage of young people who are saying it's not about being disrupted, it's about never going to college and seeing other paths in that environment. CPA Evolution, as you know, was a major project of ours, jointly, again, with a lot of feedback of thousands of people, but jointly, predominantly with NASBA. You approved our resolution in May. NASBA approved its resolution in July. And so the CPA Evolution project is in the implementation phase as we speak. And Sue, I'm going to invite you to give a brief update on that.
Sure. As Barry said, we are in the execution phase and we're moving along quite nicely. Just as a very quick reminder of what this is all about, over the last couple of years, we've been speaking with you and many other stakeholders about a new CPA licensure model that really recognizes, how the profession's skills are changing, how the services we perform are changing, new services we perform, changing hiring patterns, et cetera, and how that relates to newly licensed professionals. And so together with NASBA, an unbelievable partner in this, with your support, the support of the state boards, we are executing on a CPA licensure model that will result in newly licensed talent having a strong foundation, a foundational core, if you would, in accounting, auditing, tax, and technology, while then allowing that CPA candidate to demonstrate deeper knowledge in one of three areas: tax compliance and planning, business analysis and reporting, and information systems and controls. So, as I said, execution has started. And it's pretty big. It involves supporting academia in the areas of model curriculum development and teaching resources. It involves changing state statute and rules, and it involves developing a new CPA exam. And all of this needs to be done by January 1 of 2024. Together with NASBA, we've created a number of working groups populated with a broad range of stakeholders to assist us in this effort. As it relates to academia, we've already begun pulling together teaching resources, particularly to support smaller universities and historically Black colleges and universities. We launched an academic resource hub, which is free for all faculty, that currently has over 90 resources to help integrate topics like data analytics into their courses. And there are a number of firms who have donated resources, as well as the Center for Audit Quality. We also put together several working groups of practitioners and faculty to help us actually develop the model curricula in both the core and disciplines areas. And the goal for those working groups, I believe, is towards the end of 2021 to have them done. As it relates to the exam, we've got several focus groups helping the CPA exam team understand what needs to be done with exam content in both the core and discipline areas. And that work will drive the development of a practice analysis and a blueprint for a new exam, which we'll build. Also, a group of state board members and administrators are working on what transition will look like for candidates that may be in the middle of the exam pipeline when the exam switches over, because we are not going to be running two exams at the same time. We're going to flip the switch. And so there will be some CPA candidates who will be in the middle, and we're working to better understand, what that transition will look like to support those candidates. We've got a group looking at whether and how a framework for internships could be developed that would work for firm students and universities who currently don't have formal internship programs. So good stuff going on there. We're working on changes to the one state law and the 7 state board rules that need changing, and NASBA, as you would expect, is taking the lead on that. So work going on that front, and I know the state societies are very heavily engaged in that as well, and thank you for that. And then lastly, we're developing stakeholder engagement and communication plans that will be delivered and executed over the 3-year period. It is really important that we continue to engage with a myriad of stakeholders on this topic: students, faculty, regulators, practitioners, all of those individuals that we've been engaging with over the last few years to make this project a success. So a lot going on. We're well on our way, and you've been an amazing part of this. So I want to thank you for your ongoing support. Back to you, Barry.
Thank you, Sue. Truly very exciting and important. To just cover 2 last topics, and then we'll go into the Q&A on corporate reporting, integrated reporting, sustainability. Just to give you a little flavor of that, this is an area that has not evolved very quickly in the United States, although sustainability reporting is taking on a greater importance in all different shapes and size entities in the United States. Depending on the results of the election, it could become an even bigger issue in the US. One of the problems that exists globally on this particular area is a myriad of proposed answers and not a lot of standardization and comparability activities. We are actively engaged with entities that are out there, and very specifically entities that are focused on, and it's an agenda we have brought on the global stage, the rationalization and simplification of this space. There is a lot happening to make that a reality. There is a discussion paper out now by the IFRS trustees on how to think about their role, if anything, in this space. There are entities that are in serious conversations about how to rationalize and simplify this space so that businesses and investors can understand what's material and what's appropriate in these types of areas. The reason why I'm putting it on this agenda and spending a little bit more time than I normally do is because I do believe over the next several months, there will be movement in this space, movement probably on a global basis. And I think that it could be very dramatic movement. It could be the evolution of some things that we've been working on, really dating back to 1995 on something called enhanced business reporting. That is the notion of a bigger business reporting set, not just accounting, of which ultimately assurance auditing would fall over this bigger information set to produce consistency, comparability, and reliability like we think about financial information. Now, those of you who have heard me speak, I generally speak a little bit on this topic, have been for a long, long time. I think it is the future of where business information and business reporting is headed. It will admittedly start with larger businesses, but it begins to cascade down as private equity gets involved, other types of investment groups get involved as to what they expect, particularly in the sustainability space. Sustainability is at the front of the line today, but bigger business reporting is not just in the environmental space. It includes things like intellectual property, relationship management, human capital, things that have not been in the footprint of quote unquote accounting in the past will likely emerge from this, various different speeds, with sustainability being the fastest in this space. So stay tuned. Be aware that there are movements happening to rationalize a space that frankly has over 200 different frameworks, models, measurements, some purported to be standards. And I think you will begin to see, much like if we were alive in the 1930s, a rationalization of accounting standards. I think you're going to start to see this happen. It's an important role if you're in management accounting. You want to be the home of this information flow. And if you're in public practice, it's ultimately about this broader assurance in that space. And finally, I want you all to be to know that we are taking the future not only from an innovation and an opportunity perspective in serious accord, but we're also thinking about the risk of the profession, particularly in today's environment. We have a working group that we've put into the environment of thinking they are in 2022 and looking back at 2020 and imagining all those things that either the profession could have taken advantage of or should have been aware of or should have been more diligent about, what people with 2020 hindsight might be saying about the profession in that environment, and then taking mitigation approaches as to what should we be either doing, communicating, managing in various ways today to minimize that risk that might be imagined in 2022. And the team has been fantastic on this process. So as an example, when you heard me earlier in this presentation, I talked about auditing on December 31, and I said that audit practitioners need to understand that COVID is not an excuse to not be diligent in that process. That's an example of reminding people in the profession where someone could second guess us in 2022. So those things are many, many tentacles that are working in that process. We won't get that all right either, but there is a comprehensive element in that space. And so next slide, last slide, I would just again tell you that I believe our profession is doing extraordinarily well. We talked about pipeline. I think our message for state societies, volunteer members who go to high schools and early college, once we can do those things again physically, the message about the purpose of this profession, how it has stepped up, and frankly, how it is an incredibly successful career path, I think will resonate very well. We have parents and kids today eating at the dinner table like they've never been before. Young people are worried about what is that purpose? What is I'm going to do that has a purpose and a meaning? And parents, of course, are worried about what is it that you're going to do that is going to be job sustaining. I think our message collectively as a profession will be very powerful as we move forward in that space. And that's due to the men and women in our profession, the ability of our profession to balance its trusted advisor role and opportunities with its public interest activities. So thank you very much for what you do. And thank you very much for the ability for me to give you this sort of update of what we have been doing, what we are doing, and what we are working on for the future.